Okay, this is component 2, paper 3. This is the essay. We've got such a fabulous amount of information on this. We've got photographs, we've got data, and we've got a graph. Yummy! So we need to read through the information carefully, and we need to then read the question carefully so we know what we need to talk about. So the banded snail, Sepia nemoralis, is found in a variety of habitats such as grassland, sand dunes and bases of hedges. The shell colour varies, so we've got yellow, which looks green, brown, pink and white. So we've got 4 colours. And we've got shells that can be unbanded or have up to 5 bands. So we've got 0 bands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bands. Thrushes smash snails on particular stones called anvils to break open the shell and eat the snail. Collecting snail shells from a thrush's anvil makes it possible to find out the proportion of the differently coloured and patterned snails the thrush has found and eaten at different times of the year. So what I'm thinking there is that the more of snails caught if population's bigger. And I'm also thinking that thrush is going to be a selection pressure. So thrush is a predator, and the snail is its prey. And what do I know about prey species? They kind of do better if they've got a bit of camouflage. So, snails collected that were yellow. So April we've got 42%, and in June we've got 24%, so we've got more caught in April and less in June. And I'm thinking now, are they better hidden in June? If the thrush is having to work harder? That there's a lower population, maybe? Something else eating them, perhaps? And then we've got a graph. So we've got percentage yellow snails and percentage with 1 or no band. So up here, these dark ones living in woods, I'm thinking these are not yellow, so these are brown maybe. So if they're living in the woods, they're going to be dark, aren't they? They're going to be brown and one solid colour. Solid brown snails probably, not many bands. And then in the grasslands we've got the opposite. So over here we've got yellow snails with bands. Yellow banded in hedgerows and grasslands, and so I'm thinking, there's my grass, and I've got a little snail in there, and it's got some stripes on it, and it's yellow in colour. And around in the bottom of a hedge, in deciduous woods, I've got big trees, lots of shade, and my little snails are all, completely dark. Okay. Discuss the principle of genetic polymorphism and biodiversity. Okay. So this is from the stuff we did in lower 6th about biodiversity. Sepia nemoralis are often used to illustrate the principles of natural selection. Okay. Use the data. We need to use the data to describe and explain the process of natural selection in these snails. So here I'm going to be talking about selection pressure, selection advantage, and I'm going to use some of the data to explain where they're living. These data were collected in 1957. How many data differ today because we're removing hedgerows and declines in thrush population? So now, I need to sort out my 3 areas. So I seem to have a bit on natural selection, that down. So I'm going to do a bit on natural selection. I've got to do a bit on hedgerow removal. And decreasing thrushes. And I've got to do a bit on genetic polymorphism. That's that first bit, isn't it? Genetic polymorphism and biodiversity. So I can now start to construct a plan. So in fact this should be first, so I'm going to do that first, then natural selection, then that. That's what it tells me to do. So area 1, genetic polymorphism. What can I say? I need to talk about alleles, more that are heterozygous, so higher genetic diversity. How do I know that we've got alleles? I need to talk about colours, I need to talk about bands, I need to talk about them being inherited. I need to then relate that to, you know, more multiple alleles for the same characteristic. If we think back to my information, I said there were 4 colours and up to 5 bands from 0. That's 10 characteristics, probably a gene for colour and a gene for bands and lots of alleles. At least 10 alleles for that. So, and then we've got the idea of increased genetic diversity and variation. So, and I need to write a proper paragraph. I can't just put notes. I can't put a little side heading going genetic polymorphism, blip, lots of alleles, blips. There was, you know, I've got, you know, lots of phenotypes. I can't. You've got to kind of, you know, you've got to put it together into a paragraph. So natural selection. I want to talk about the thrush. Well, I wish I could spell it. Thrush being a predator. So this is my selection pressure. I want to talk about an advantageous allele. For camouflage. And it's told me to use the data, so I need to say that they're yellow eaten more in April. So there's a seasonal variation, and then and I can relate that to camouflage if I want to, or I can relate it to population size if I want to. And then I've got the idea of where they're living, so I'm going to talk about yellow banded in grass and dark in woods, and I'm going to talk about camouflage there. And then right, okay, just let me think. Natural selection, we're talking about survival of the fittest, so we're talking about survive, reproduce and pass on alleles, and it has to be alleles and not genes or characteristics. So again, I need to put that into a paragraph, and when I'm doing, you know, if I was talking about this, for example, I haven't really ordered it very well. I've sort of gone, oh, you know, what does genetic polymorphism mean? Well, why don't I explain my evidence first of all? So I'd perhaps talk about colours and bands, and that means lots of phenotypes, and those are inherited, which means I've got lots of alleles. So the more alleles, the more heterozygotes I've got, which increases genetic diversity. And that's, it's 7 sentences. Maybe, some of those could push into 1 sentence, This picture of the snail shows that they've got 4 different colours, different band numbers, 6 different band numbers, which means there's lots of phenotypes. That could be just 1 sentence. This, I'm going to follow through that natural selection thing, and then of course you're going to end up with allele frequency. And you probably need to explain why it's different in each habitat. And then last but not least, I'm going to talk about hedgerow removal. Why might it differ? So I'm going to talk about removal. So I'm thinking if you take away the hedgerows, that possibly that would affect your yellow banded snails more. You're more affected. There may be you've got less thrushes, so that would make them more likely or less likely to be caught because there's less thrushes about to survive. So the incidence, again, I'm going to talk about allele frequency. It'll increase if you've got, more yellow banded snails surviving, then their allele frequency is going to increase, and I might put something about generations in there just to make it up. And again, I want to you need to write a paragraph.